For nearly 20 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban looked untouchable, the Hollywood actress and the country musician who had somehow beaten the odds. But in 2025, that illusion shattered. Within days of his silent move out of their Nashville home, Nicole filed for divorce, and the truth she's been hiding for years started to pour out. Behind the smiles, the hand-holding, and the red carpet vows was a story of betrayal, exhaustion, and a woman who finally refused to protect a man who stopped fighting for her. The perfect illusion. For almost 2 decades, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban stood as Hollywood's favorite symbol of enduring love. Proof, people said, that fame didn't have to destroy marriage. They were the golden couple who seemed to balance glamour and humility, artistry and devotion. But behind the polished smiles and matching red carpet poses was a story far more fragile. Their love, like many great Hollywood romances, began in magic and ended in quiet heartbreak. They met in 2005 at the G'day USA Gala in Los Angeles, a celebration of Australian talent abroad. Nicole was 38, still glowing from her Oscar win for The Hours, yet privately haunted by the wounds of her divorce from Tom Cruise and the painful loss of custody of her 2 adopted children, Isabella and Connor. She had rebuilt her career, her image, and her strength, but not her sense of family. Keith, just 37, was a rising country star whose songs carried the ache of someone trying to outrun his own demons. He'd spent years battling substance abuse, sometimes winning, sometimes losing. To the world, they were opposites. To each other, they were mirror images of broken souls desperate for stability. Their connection was instant, though it didn't unfold like a whirlwind tabloid romance. Keith took months to call her after their first meeting, claiming he was intimidated by her presence. When he finally did, they fell fast. By June 2006, they married in a candlelit ceremony at St. Patrick's Estate in Sydney. Nicole glowed in her Balenciaga gown. Keith sang to her at the reception. The night was intimate, emotional, the kind of wedding people called a love story written in gold. But fairy tales rarely survive reality. Just 4 months after the wedding, Keith checked himself into rehab for alcohol addiction. Nicole was blindsided. Instead of walking away, she did what she always did. She stayed. She visited him in treatment, protected him from headlines, and told friends that love meant forgiveness. In truth, she was fighting not only for him, but for the family she'd once lost. Over the next few years, she kept the illusion alive. Keith thanked her publicly at award shows, his voice trembling as he called her his saving grace. She returned the favor, calling him the man who brought me back to life. In 2008, they welcomed their first daughter, Sunday Rose, followed by Faith Margaret in 2010. To the outside world, it looked perfect. Hollywood's disciplined queen and Nashville's wild heart, finally tamed by love. But behind closed doors, the cracks deepened. His long tours, the lingering shadows of addiction, and her constant fear of losing another husband began to corrode the bond they'd built. She waited up for phone calls that never came. He drowned exhaustion in the only way he knew, through work, through music, through distance. Nicole was strong, graceful, endlessly forgiving, but even grace has limits. And by the time the world finally saw the truth, the fairy tale everyone envied was no longer shining. It was breaking. The perfect illusion was starting to fall apart. The marriage that became a performance. By their 10th anniversary, Nicole and Keith had already survived what most couples wouldn't. Rehab, distance, and fame had tested them, but the pressure to look unbreakable tested them even more. They became masters of illusion. On red carpets, they held hands like teenagers. In interviews, they spoke in matching phrases. "We've never been stronger. We're each other's rocks." Yet behind those words was exhaustion. Nicole was holding up a marriage that had started to drain her. Keith was growing restless, tired of being seen as the one who always needed saving. Their love turned into a balancing act. Nicole's world revolved around routine and family, a stability she'd once lost with Tom Cruise. Keith's life was chaos, tours, long nights, and the constant lure of temptation. They tried to make rules, never more than a few weeks apart, always talk before bed. But real life doesn't follow rules. Schedules collided, promises slipped, and quiet resentment replaced passion. She wanted presence. He wanted space. By the mid-2000s, the couple's public image had become part of their brand. Magazine covers called them Hollywood's last real marriage. Fans needed to believe in them, and so they played the parts. At award shows, Keith would kiss her shoulder, whisper something sweet for the cameras. Nicole would smile, gracious and composed. But insiders began noticing the cracks, the forced laughter, the way she seemed to flinch at rehearsed affection. To friends, it was clear she was tired of being his anchor. To him, her need for control felt suffocating. The man she had rescued no longer wanted to be saved, and the woman who once found peace in him now felt trapped in a performance she could no longer sustain. By 2023, whispers started to spread, that they were living separate lives, that he was away more than home, that she was done pretending. But even then, Nicole fought to keep the family together. She had already lost 2 children to distance before. She wasn't going to lose 2 more to silence. Still, the silence between them was growing louder every day. The breaking point. When love turned to distance. By early 2024, the cracks had become impossible to ignore. Nicole Kidman was filming Practical Magic 2 in London with Sandra Bullock when friends noticed a change in her voice. Soft, uncertain, almost distracted. She no longer spoke of Keith in the present tense. Back in Nashville, Keith Urban had quietly set up his own place, telling friends he needed space to think. The truth was simpler and crueler. He had already decided the marriage was done. Nicole didn't know it then. For months, she believed they were working through another rough patch. When the tabloids asked about her marriage, she gave calm, reassuring answers. Marriage takes work. We're both committed, but the commitment had become one-sided. Keith had stopped returning calls, stopped showing up at family dinners. His absence stretched from days into weeks. By June 2024, they were living separate lives. She in London, filming long hours, and he on tour, surrounded by noise that drowned out his guilt. The last time they were seen together in public was at a soccer match in Nashville on June 20th. They looked awkward, distant, like 2 actors forced to share a stage after the play had already ended. That was the night, friends say, that Keith decided to leave the family home for good. Nicole came back from London to an empty house. He was gone. No confrontation, no goodbye, just quiet departure. For a woman who had spent years believing love could conquer everything, the silence was unbearable. Still, she refused to let the story end in chaos. Even as whispers of another woman in his touring crew began to surface, Nicole stayed composed. She focused on her daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, promising herself that no matter what happened, she would not let history repeat itself. When news broke in late September that she had officially filed for divorce, the public assumed she was the one ending it. But those close to her knew the truth. Keith had walked out months earlier. Her filing wasn't revenge, it was closure. The divorce that shook Hollywood. When Nicole Kidman filed for divorce on September 30th, 2025, the papers were simple, irreconcilable differences. But behind those 2 words was 19 years of pain, loyalty, and silence finally breaking. Insiders said she'd agonized over the decision for months, hoping Keith would change his mind. He didn't. He had already signed his portion of the paperwork weeks earlier, quietly accepting the end of their marriage. What made it worse was the timing. Nicole filed just 24 hours after the world learned Keith had moved out of their Nashville home. To those close to her, it wasn't a cold move. It was survival. Friends think her filing the divorce papers so publicly was her little act of revenge for him giving up on her, one insider told Woman's Day. But even then, she wasn't angry as much as she was hurt. She had fought for the marriage long after he'd stopped trying. The divorce documents revealed what she valued most, her daughters. Nicole requested primary residential custody of Sunday Rose, now 17, and Faith Margaret, 14. Keith would have them 59 days a year. No spousal or child support was requested. Both had their own fortunes. For Nicole, this wasn't about money. It was about protecting stability for her girls. But Keith's reaction to the divorce shocked everyone. Just days after the filing, he appeared on stage in Pennsylvania. No wedding ring, no The Fighter, the love song he'd once dedicated to Nicole. Instead, he altered the lyrics to one of his breakup anthems, changing "Take your space and take your reasons" to "Take your unreasonable reasons." The crowd gasped. The message was unmistakable. For the first time, the man she had protected was lashing out publicly. He used his stage to rewrite the story, painting himself as the one left behind. Nicole, meanwhile, stayed silent, dignified, but devastated. The woman who once rebuilt her life after Tom Cruise was now forced to watch her second-great love unravel in front of the entire world. The secrets Nicole could no longer keep. In the weeks after the divorce became public, Nicole Kidman did something she rarely does. She stopped hiding her pain. There were no interviews full of polished lines, no carefully staged family photos. Instead, silence, and then honesty. In a Vogue cover story published on October 9th, just before the split was announced, the interviewer described her as wry, rueful, unsure of herself. When asked how she felt in this stage of her life, she said softly, "How many times do you have to be taught that you think you know where your life is going and then it isn't going in that direction?" It was a quiet confession, and a clear sign that she already knew what was coming. Friends say she had held out hope until the very end. "She's heartbroken but still in love with him," one told Daily Mail. "She would get back with him in a heartbeat." Even after he walked out, even after reports emerged that he'd grown close to another woman in the music industry, Nicole couldn't stop loving him. But love wasn't enough anymore. The same loyalty that once defined her had now become her prison. People close to the couple confirmed that Keith had been emotionally distant for months before leaving. While she was filming Practical Magic 2 in London, he quietly packed his things and moved out of their Nashville compound. When she returned, he was gone. No warning, no explanation. To make matters worse, she soon discovered he had already signed the divorce papers weeks earlier. "It's like someone took a sledgehammer to her whole world," one insider said. Yet even as rumors of his flirtations on tour grew, including his overly playful stage moments with a younger guitarist, Nicole refused to humiliate him publicly. She didn't post, didn't lash out, didn't deny or confirm. But through friends and interviews, a different picture emerged. One of a woman who had carried a marriage far longer than she should have, who forgave more than she ever admitted, and who finally ran out of pieces to give. After the storm. What Nicole finally revealed. By late October 2025, the headlines had begun to fade, but Nicole Kidman's silence spoke louder than any interview. She was seen in Nashville, walking hand in hand with her daughters, her expression calm but unreadable. Those close to her said she had finally stopped asking why he left. "She realized she can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved," a friend shared. For the first time in years, Nicole wasn't playing the role of the caretaker, the rescuer, or the perfect wife. She was simply trying to be herself again. Privately, she admitted to friends that the hardest part wasn't losing Keith. It was realizing he had given up long before she did. "She fought until the end," one insider told Woman's Day, but when she saw he had already planned his exit, she knew it was over. What made it worse was learning that he might have been using pieces of their private life in his music. Nicole reportedly believes Keith drew inspiration from their personal texts and arguments for lyrics on his 2024 album, High and Alive. When she confronted him, he went silent, and that silence told her everything. Despite everything, she remains gracious. Sources say she's chosen not to retaliate, not to expose every private detail, even though she could. Instead, she's focusing on her daughters, her work, and protecting the peace she fought so hard to create. Friends say she's determined to stay in Nashville so her girls can finish school without upheaval. Her only request in the divorce, 306 custody days a year, wasn't about control, it was about love. To those who've known her for decades, Nicole's heartbreak feels tragically familiar. She once lost her family after her divorce from Tom Cruise. Now, she's lost another love. But this time, she's not running away. She's facing it head-on, turning pain into something quietly defiant. The perfect Hollywood marriage is gone, but what remains is something far more real. A woman who finally stopped protecting the man who broke her heart. Nicole Kidman once said, "You can't control life, you can only live it." Do you think she made the right choice by finally walking away? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true Hollywood stories.